Good evening, good evening. Welcome, Nerdacity Podcast. We're doing an IG Live tonight, and I'm DuEwa Frazier, your host, Nerd in Chief of Nerdacity. And my guest tonight is the Crystal Wilkinson, who is a wondrous poet, a magical woman, and Kentucky's Poet Laureate. So we'll be welcoming Crystal. And let's see if she's on as of yet. And if you're joining me, thanks for joining. And we'll add Crystal in just a moment. While we wait for Crystal, there she is. Yes.
Oh,
Hi, Crystal.
hello.
Can you hear me, see me okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Looking beautiful and gorgeous as always. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Thank you so much. So, Crystal, what I'd like to do, generally when I do the IG Live, I want to read your biography and, then just get into our chat and all the wonderful things you got going on. I'm so excited because we have Perfect Black here tonight.
Yes.
So I'm going to read your bio as what I have from your website. And of course, we'd love to learn more about new things you're doing, what's coming up for you, and all of that. Crystal Wilkinson, a recent fellowship recipient of the Academy of American Poets, is Kentucky's Poet Laureate. She is the award-winning author of Perfect Black, a collection of poems, and 3 works of fiction, The Birds of Opulence, Street and Blackberries. She is the recipient of a 2022 NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Poetry, a 2021 O. Henry Prize, a 2020 USA Artist Fellowship, and a 2016 Ernest J. Gaines Prize for Literacy Excellence. Crystal has received recognition from the Yaddo Foundation, Hedgebrook, the Vermont Studio Center for the Arts, the Hermitage Foundation, and others. Her short stories, poems, and essays have appeared in numerous journals and anthologies, including most recently in The Atlantic, the Kenyon Review, Story, Agni Literary Journal, Emergence, Oxford American and Southern Cultures. Praise Song for the Kitchen Ghosts, a culinary memoir, is forthcoming from Clarkson Potter, Penguin Random House. Crystal currently teaches at the University of Kentucky, where she is a professor of English in the MFA in Creative Writing program. Everyone, please welcome Crystal. I'm so excited. I'm getting a little tongue-tied. Crystal Wilkinson. Okay.
Thank you.
Crystal, congratulations, because if I'm not mistaken, you are Kentucky's first Black woman poet laureate. Is that correct?
I am.
That
Yeah.
is
One other black
amazing.
man before me, Frank X. Walker, several years ago, maybe 10 years ago.
Yes.
And then I'm the first Black woman. Yes.
That is amazing. What a wonderful journey, right, for you, I guess. And, I'm reading your biography and just, did you know your path as a poet, as a writer, as an educator would lead to being a poet laureate? Is that something you previously thought about, dreamt about?
It wasn't. I growing up as a little girl in rural Kentucky, I always I wanted to be a writer. I knew that much. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew I wanted to be a writer. I knew that my primary mode of communication was the written word over the verbal.
Right.
I would often give my grandmother notes written down, rather than talk. And so I knew that writing was my primary mode of communication, but I didn't know what that meant. and it wasn't until, after I graduated from high school at 16, it was long after that, after college even, where I began to try to figure out what it meant to be published. And then my shy self, I still am a person who's kind of timid, as many writers are, or reserved. And I always thought I'd write a book. It's kind of like, I don't know, Moses in the basket or something. You write this book and it goes out there in the world and you don't have to go with it. And I remember being so surprised that I had to go with it. And I'll just say the work has taken me in places that I never knew that we would, that we would go there. And being Poet Laureate of Kentucky is one of them. Because for many, many years, I have gone to the book fair. We have a huge Kentucky book fair every year, and I would go, and there would be, Wendell Berry and various, I loved Gail Jones and always hoped she would show up somewhere, but she's more reclusive than that. But, meeting Bell Hooks, and I just, those were all writers that I admired, and to receive that kind of accolade of being Poet Laureate was just very exciting and sort of coming full circle for me.
So wonderful. And, I often see, because I follow you on all the, social media works, it's like you are speaking, at a new place, like every week. Crystal is here. She's, there. She's, in person. She's doing virtual. How do you balance and keep up with your schedule as Poet Laureate and, having to really get out there now that we're back outside, so to speak, with your work as a professor and even having time and carving out space for your own writing and creativity and, solitude time?
Well, it's been difficult, right? It's always been difficult for me not to overextend myself because, I'm glad someone else keeps my calendar now, for the most part, because I look at the calendar and I think, oh, well, those days are open. I can say yes to this. But I don't think about like what that's going to feel like living it, that I've got, meetings at work and I've got students to meet with. And then, I'm in New Jersey. And then the next one that I've just said yes to is in California, 4 days later.
Wow.
And so I have to, I'm learning more and more about self-care. And as far as my writing is concerned, one of the things that saves the written word is writing retreats for me, which can be anything from applying to one of those larger writing retreats like Yaddo. I really love Yaddo and have been there several times, all the way to, there are lots of like local places here in Kentucky. The Kentucky Foundation for Women has a little place for women called the Hopscotch House. And sometimes I'll schedule a weekend there. So that's been important to nurture my writing time and have long extended period of times. And by long, I mean 2 days, 3 days.
Yes, because that can
2 weeks, a month.
Right. For a writer, it can feel, like a long amount of time for sure. And so, Crystal, during the pandemic, I often ask writers who are featured, if the pandemic and the way just the world is changing around us in recent years, if that at all impacted your work, your creativity, your writing life, and if so, in what way, and what have you, I guess I would say, what have you learned from that time period?
I think the importance of family is one thing that I've learned. And I think as an artist, I was afraid, of course, during the pandemic, like everyone else, but there was what started out as a tiny part of me and then a larger part of me that appreciated the world making us stop, right? I hadn't even, like paid attention to my own home and my partner in any particular up close way, because we were always just like going.
Right.
And so while it was extremely frightening, as a human being, as a person of the world, watching all these people be sick, and it was frightening to think about my own health and the people's health in my family and friends. But the artist in me learned something from that time, and it was about slowing down when possible, because it made you slow down. And the sort of panic anxiety part of me would put on a mask and walk around the block and come back and see if there was something on my mind worth writing. And then from there, I began to really pay attention to the natural world around my house. And so I started trying to garden again, which I hadn't done for a number of years, and sort of putting my hands in the dirt again and thinking about my ancestry and my family sort of spurred me on to begin to do more with that and to write about that. And so that's kind of how it affected me. And it made me realize that community can mean a lot of things. I know that Nikki Finney's one of my best friends, and her book launch happened right in the middle of the pandemic. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be so crazy. And my own book launch happened in the middle of the pandemic, but Nikki's came first. And I was thinking, there is no way that we're going to get like that warm, cozy feeling that we can get in person. And, I felt so bad for all the writers who had these wonderful books coming out. But we found a way. Like, there were so many people that found ways to have community. I think Kiese was one of the first people that, when his books were coming out during the pandemic, that to have the conversation. So you had all these writers moving away from the reading, but moving toward having a conversation with one another.
Sure.
And it became really like the next best thing to being able to hug and touch each other and to buy the books in person and have them signed. So all of that, I think, is important, that it taught us or retaught us to make a way out of no way.
So true. And it's like virtual became a thing, right? The virtual poetry reading, or the virtual, book signing and reading and presentations and all of that. Did you participate in a number of virtual events during that time, the early parts of the pandemic?
I did. My own book launch for Perfect Black was supposed to be in person, and then, our numbers here shot up suddenly, and my husband has a lung condition, so it was like, oh my gosh, we can't do this. And so I think almost my entire tour was virtual. And aside from having that sort of small launch here that was taped, Karis Books in Atlanta, and I was in a conversation with Kiese for that, was like the first sort of national launch. And then almost all my events were virtual.
Yeah. And have you found that there's still kind of a mix of those? Like, there's in person, but there's still a thread of the virtual programs and events going on. Have you noticed that as well?
Yes, I have, and I still have value for both of them. I think it's made us rethink. I used to run the visiting writer series here at my university, and I think it's made us rethink the possibilities of a live event even. So there's lots of hybrid events. I've seen people moving more toward, even for in-person events, moving more toward the conversation or the panel, even if it's a small panel. And I've loved that. And one of the things that I love about it is that I think that so many of the things that we're doing are feminist or womanist models. Like, they're not like this sort of standard, like, get behind a podium and which I think of as, not always, but as sort of male. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that some of these other things that we're doing are more womanist models. And
Sure.
I like seeing that too.
I appreciate that. That makes me think of a video I showed my students the other day, Alice Walker at Barnard College, talking about Zora Neale Hurston. But before she got started, she took out, you know, like a shaker, a rattle, a shaker ray. And she did this all around, and everyone got quiet. I couldn't see the audience, but it was as if they were all looking like, wait, what does this mean? And she
Hmm.
said, oh, I'm banishing the academic air in the room. And I thought, that is genius. In other words, out with that stuffy stuff, out with the cold and the stuffiness, and we're bringing in the intuition, the creativity, the earthiness, all of that is not academic.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, a couple of events that I participated in. One of them was that you reminded me of the Gail Jones Symposium that was online. And it was the warmest, the freshest, uh, uh, all put on by all Black women. And to have, you know, some of the more famous people that she has worked with to come through. And it also reminded me of you know, Belle. I'm from Kentucky, and Bell Hooks was a close friend. And all of these events, of course, you know, she was sick during all this time, but these events and the way that they were put on reminded me of her. Like when I worked with her at Berea College, and she said she was having a panel, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to sneak in here and sneak in the back and go see this panel that Bill's putting on. But when I opened the door to this big room, there was probably 100 people in a big circle. And it was
Wow.
all participatory. Like you couldn't sit there without, you know, she said, oh, come on in, Crystal, and introduce
Oh,
yourself. And I'm going, oh my God.
right. You're just trying to sneak in, like, you know,
Yeah.
then you get called
But it was
out.
wonderful because it was a different model that you don't often see in
Right.
academia. So it was warm and it was refreshing. And after you got accustomed to it, you thought, oh, this is how it should be. This is great. So I think the pandemic has pushed us more toward those kinds of models too.
I love that. And maybe even getting us to think even a little deeper about our interactions, about our relationships, about even as a writer, as a poet, your interaction and relationship to your readers and your audience. I think
Absolutely. Yeah.
that has really felt different, and it's changed and morphed in a good way.
Hmm.
Here we are thinking we were just really moving away from each other, but to your point, it feels in a lot of ways that we've actually gotten closer
Yes.
within our communities, and I really appreciate the network as well. And so, Crystal, I want to ask you. This is your fourth book, fourth.
Hmm. Fourth.
Okay, and would you say that this collection is somewhat autobiographical?
Yes. I would say that it's you know, it's sort of a hybrid. It is a memoir, I think, in verse, a memoir in verse and lyric essays, prose poems. I think I've played a lot with today that I was afraid when Perfect Black came out, because being a fiction writer so long, there's something wonderful about taking your haunts, whatever they are, the thread of your haunts, and saying, okay, I want to write about this, but I'm not going to write about it head on. So I'm going to slip it
Right.
in here. I'm going to give this part of me to a character. I'm going to add, you know, layer fiction on top of that. And of course you can do that with poetry as well. But I found that one of the reasons why I didn't write a collection of poetry for so long is that for me, the speaker of the poem is me or is adjacent to me.
Yeah.
So that's the only way that I can write poetry. And so it felt much more close to the bone and therefore more frightening. Like I was much more hesitant to put those poems out into the world, and I'm much more hesitant. Not so much now, I've gotten used to it, but when I first started reading them, I was kind of going, "Oh my goodness."
Right.
You know, here we go.
Is it the vulnerability? Is it that even though, others may not know all of those details, but is it just you as the creator feeling vulnerable because those details, memories and things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely it's the vulnerability. And it's again, there's something more. I've always gotten such a great joy out of writing fiction. And some of that is sort of the sneaky part of writing fiction, right? But like I said, that, you can slide something in there and you can get, I find it's like the play. It's play. And when I say play, I mean like the, the little girl in me who, loved to write because there was play in it, right? So I could sneak in a part of me or give this character my nose or my physical features, and then I could layer fiction on. And for poetry, for me, it's just much more closer, like I say, closer to the bone, much more akin to truth. And I think the brevity plays into that too, the brevity of it. That there's not, I call myself a language whore. I really love, I really love beautiful language. And of course, you can use figurative language and beautiful language in poetry, but it's the brevity of it that makes it spare too. And so there it is, there it all is. Sort of standing up on the page. So that's been a big part of it.
That's wonderful. And I love your, when I look at you, and I wanted to be sure I mention this, when I see the various photos of you and you're wearing such beautiful, bright colors, you remind me of this is what people are attracted to. It's like colors as energy. And I just see you as fully embodying all of your creativity, not in just your words, your writing, but even in your style, Crystal. And I was just wondering, before I ask you to please share a poem, if you can tell me how your style, your fashion, your colors, and your sensibility and how you present yourself stylistically, how that plays a part in your artistic nature, your expression, and your interacting with others.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's all, for me, it's all a part of it, right? I've come, I think the older I've gotten, the more comfortable I am with being more fully myself. And it's been interesting. My children who are all adults now kind of go, "Mama, what do you have on?" And I think I have on what I've always wanted to wear. Like I've always wanted to. And so, getting comfortable with myself and being comfortable with my body and wearing things, mismatching patterns and wearing bright colors. It's become a way, leaning more into my artistic self. And I think that what I mean by that is the same way a couple of years ago, so during the pandemic or right on the cusp of the pandemic, I decided that I wasn't any longer a bifurcated writer, so that my poet self and my fiction self and my nonfiction self all lived in the same body, in the same mind, in the same spirit, in the same imagination. And I think that my clothes and my glasses, shoes, earrings, that's all an extension of that. So it makes me feel as if I'm writing all the time, that my imagination is present.
Yeah. It makes me as an outsider, you know, observing you, it also makes me feel like this is a woman, this is a person, this person is an artist who is fully with inside of themselves, fully, everything is okay. You're not splitting yourself and compartmentalizing like, okay, I'm at work, I'm like this. When I'm doing poetry, I'm like this. When I'm with my family, I'm like this. Like, you are all fully incorporated.
Yes,
Can
all the
you
time.
give, and I think that's something, well, my observation and experience, I think sometimes that's something that women may struggle with, regardless of whether or not you're an artist or not. Certainly it's something I've struggled with, and I think maybe it has in earlier years had to do with, okay, who you are perceived to be versus who you know you are inside. Because, you know, you mentioned, I think earlier, you know, as artists, we, like, I know I'm an introvert, extrovert. I can be extroverted, but I really do, I can kind of, you know, go into my own cave kind of thing. And maybe that is an artist thing or a writer thing. But if you could give advice to an artist or a woman, a creative who is perhaps struggling with, how do I incorporate all of myself and be okay and be all of who I am at all times?
I mean, I think it perhaps one way to do it would be to do it in increments, right? And let it be your own secret. You know, if you just wear something that you really love, and maybe it's just earrings, or maybe it's a bright red lip, or maybe it's a piece of jewelry. Um, and for me, it just becomes an enhancement of my creativity. And I think that it also makes you feel less guilty or less burdened that you didn't
Yes.
put words down on the page that day. If you're walking in the world as an artist and you allow yourself to, you know, not just have the art on, but also to be, I think it makes me more observant because I feel like I'm walking in the world fully in myself. So I don't miss anything either. I'm very nosy. Like I don't miss
Oh, I
anything and
love
it's all
that.
a part of
Oh,
it.
and that, having that note, because I'm nosy too. And I think that's, but not in a negative, like some people think when you say nosy, oh, they're a gossip. But I think the nosy is more like curious,
Yeah.
wanting to learn from and know more, you know, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Can that be nosy too?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, and that's what I mean. I don't mean it in like a gossipy, nosy kind of way.
Right.
Although I got some of that in me too, but I mean it like being observant in the world and being curious, because I think
Yeah.
that combination of experience, curiosity, and imagination is what keeps our wheels turning. And often something will happen in real life that will sort of haunt me for years. Um, you know, for example, I finally wrote about it, but I remember taking my daughter to work when she was working for the pool as a guard at one of the local pools. We were driving home, and this man plows into the back of us, and then
Oh,
people start you know, he hit another car behind them. So anyway, I won't tell the whole story and get into the whole
sure.
bit, but the bottom line was that um, one of the people was having an affair with another person that was in the car. And they all started, and then the man started chasing the other man and ended up being a relative. And, you know, I wrote a short story about it years later.
Hmm.
But it stuck with me all those years. And things like that do, like, you know, if you look over in traffic and there's someone crying,
Yeah.
uh, that happened in Indiana it must have been like 2008 when I was driving around, and that woman and the look on her face still is still with me. Like I wonder what happened. You know, any myriad of any realm of things could have happened, and it's not like and I find myself using that emotion, and I'm not
Hmm.
sure exactly what parts it was. So I use it, me as observer of her. Sometimes I am her,
Sure.
as a character. And that's just how my imagination works. And so, on a daily basis, those kind of things stick with me.
Are you empathic? When you look at someone or in the presence of someone, what they're feeling, you begin to feel, and those kind of things. Does
I
that
am,
happen to you?
which
Yeah.
is not always a good thing. I try to find
Right.
ways to get that off of me too, because I hold on to that for a really long time.
Yeah. Totally understand. And so, Crystal, I just want to let you know we've got quite a few folks here that came to see you. And Robin M. Caldwell says, I see her as art. She sees you as art. And someone else, Rashad, has said, you're a keen observer. And so people are just kind of chiming in while you're talking. And thank you all so
Wonderful.
much for being here. I'm talking with Crystal Wilkinson, Kentucky's poet laureate and author of this beautiful book, Perfect Black. And so, Crystal, can you share one of your beautiful poems with us? And I just want you to know I took note of the following poems that I really loved. Oh Tobacco, which I believe is about your grandfather, right?
It is. Uh-huh.
Okay, The Water Witch on Salvation. Dig, if you will, the picture, and I'm wearing purple for
Oh, yes.
Purple one who still reigns. May he rest in royal rockerness.
Absolutely.
And I thought
Absolutely.
about you because I know you're quite a Prince disciple as well.
I am just rabidly so.
Yeah.
I'm just still
I
after all these years.
also really enjoyed My Father Was a City,
Hmm. Hmm.
Dance, Black Body, and I want to say Bloodroot.
Okay.
Yeah. But anything you got, we want it. We just want to, absorb it.
Well, I think that I will. I'll read The Water Witch on Salvation. There's a suite of poems inside the book that are about my grandfather, and my grandfather was a water witch, which, depending on where you all are from, you may not know what that means, but he was a dowser. You may be more familiar with that word, but inside the book there are images, and if in this one you can see that there's a stick there, which is sort of a divining rod that he would use. And so he was often called to sort of walk. And if someone needed a whale witched, they would call my grandfather and he would go and he would find water and he'd say, well, dig here. So he was known for those kind of things. And he was also, I think, my best friend. And so The Water Witch on Salvation, my grandmother cleaned houses for white folks, and often I wasn't allowed to be present while she did that. There were some houses that I would go with her, but she also worked for some racist people, and she always wanted to protect me from that. So on those days, I would stay home. If I wasn't in school, I would stay home with my grandfather and be in the fields. And even though I'm not that old, he was still farming in the old way. So he had horses and he had a horse-drawn plow. And in some ways, that poem is about this. So the little girl in here, the grandbaby, is me. The Water Witch on Salvation. When the horses took off with the wagon and my grandbaby inside, I chased it. My legs nigh on 70 moved like a lightning 20 down the bank and across the pasture. I hollered out, "Up now." And old Trigger stopped, stood stiff and straight, real proud, cutting his black eyes at me like he was saying, "You old some bitch, I showed you." I lifted the baby out, rested her on the ground, safe. The baby took my finger. She didn't cry a lick. We left the wagon, walked the horse back to the barn. Then that girl breaks my grip and runs. She runs through the pasture, up the hill, as if nothing happened at all. Not a tear one, ne'er one sign of being scared. The nip in the morning made me think of hog killing times, made me think of old man Pat, who'd rather see the fresh chitlins rot on the ground than me take 'em home to feed my youngins. I felt old Trigger's breath on my hand, warm and stank. I pat his flank, and we're back to being friends. The hurtin' in my knee comes back on me like a toothache. Made me wonder if any living thing ought to be tamed.
Mm. Wow, it's beautiful. And
Thank you.
I feel your grandfather, like his personality, you know what I mean? And you saying that he was like your best friend, that makes more sense now with the poems that you've written, because you feel his presence, like he's there really close to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He was very much present. And even though, one of the things I remember is, I haven't written about this, but thinking about gender roles, like my grandfather, I used to say, and I don't know if I couldn't pronounce it, but I called my grandmother Granny, and I called my grandfather Mama for years, which was really, gender-wise, was a woman's name, for a grandmother and not a grandfather. But he always accepted whatever it was, and he was a really, really wise man too. And I write about that quite a bit too.
Wow. And would you say that, do you ever think about the fact that you were so close to your grandfather? When people say, a child has an old soul and things like that, was that ever said to you?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did have an old soul. If you think about it, I skipped a generation, right? I was raised by my grandparents, so I sort of skipped my mother's generation.
Right.
And I lived, really up a holler in a rural area. And, we had a small black hamlet and went to church. But by the time I came through as a young person, most of the black people had moved away. So from kindergarten through high school, me and my two cousins were the only black families there. So there was a very insular, the community was insular, but the community was also my family. Every black person I knew, I was related to,
Wow.
almost all of them. So I think that was part of it too, because we were a very insular unit, my grandparents and I, when I was growing up.
Are you an only child?
Yes, I'm my mother's only child.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. That's great. And so, Crystal, can you share another poem with us?
I can. Part of these poems, I'll try not to talk too much, but they are part of my process is about layering, right? So in this poem, even though I am present there, and a lot of these poems are really about the body in some ways. So Black Body is about my body, but it's about my body as a fat woman, my body as a black woman, my body as a mother, coming to terms that all of these belly rolls, y'all can't see that I'm rubbing on them now, that were there and was protect the womb that held my children, but also my mothering and my relationship with the black body goes far outside myself into our community. So Black Body, it's on page 56. My black body is a boulder, a stop sign. Sometimes I think my body is graceful, a song of freedom. Sometimes I think it is something that every eye cast away. I must concentrate if I want to fit into small spaces, dip into the eye of America's needle. Twice last week, I went without eating, filling up on self-loathing and discontent, only to have to give in to a slice of pound cake and a bowl of ice cream. To stay awake, I drink a glass of tea and watch the flawed reality of television housewives. Before bed, I stretch myself out along the couch and place my feet in my husband's lap. I can't stop thinking about the little black girl in the back of Philando Castile's car. Mommy, please stop screaming so they won't shoot at you. At 4 years old, she saw her mother's unarmed boyfriend shot, bleeding, dead on the front seat. I can keep you safe, she tells her mother. My body embarrasses the famous white woman at the writing conference as if my fat will rub off on her if she gets too close. When I'm sick, I want buttered sweet rice and a tender hand moving in circles on my back. Yesterday, I ate meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans at the Cracker Barrel in Tennessee. The white waitress called me baby doll. Once I remember feeling the quickening of babies in my womb, 4 tiny hands pressing against my navel, 4 tiny feet pressing against my ribs.
That's beautiful. The
Thank
black
you.
body is the meaning just historically, and you really you put that here, especially mentioning Philando Castile, that unfortunate, case.
Mm-hmm.
I love the illustration, by the way. All the illustrations here, I feel, when you talk about layering, I feel like that's an added layer of bringing the poems to us, helping us to feel and see and relive the memories kind of, with you.
Mm-hmm. I think one wonderful thing about the illustrations is that they are, they're not illustrations proper like you would see someone who reads a book and then sort of illustrates. So my partner, Ronald Davis, did these illustrations, and we wanted the illustrations to be in conversation with the poems. So if you look at the book and you read it, you could read it just by looking at the illustrations, and you get one reading. It's almost like a contrapuntal in some ways. So you have one narrative just by looking at the images, and then if you look at the images and the conversation they're having with the pieces, there's another conversation there.
And for this one, it looks like the image of the woman, it almost looks like she's looking at the poem, like there's a conversation between them here.
Yeah, and then her counterpart. So she's turned with facing the reader, and then there's another one toward the back where she's turned away from the reader. And part of it, she actually goes with the next poem, even though it's a conversation. So she's involved and she's looking at black body. She is in her own sort of heavy set, beautiful black body with her turban on. And then the next poem, A Meditation on Grief, has a lot of water imagery in it. It's a piece that also relates to, there's a poem in here about baptism, and it's sort of in conversation with that poem as well.
what really strikes me also, Crystal, about your collection is you do quite have the theme of mothers or mothering, motherhood. You have a poem, Wet Nurse. You have another poem here about, I saw, let's see, the beautiful illustration. It's like a child who is nursing. I'm trying to find that poem. Asking about my mother.
Mm-hmm.
Mother's Day. And even when I look at the poem Dirge, I see a mother in this poem as well. It's almost like a description of Mother Earth. You know, she can be found down by the river. And so I wanted to ask you, what was your inspiration or focus with the poems about mothers?
I think part of what I'm doing, and again, you know, if I am admitting that most of these, the speaker of the poem is me or adjacent, sometimes I think of the speaker of the poem being inside me. Sometimes it's standing to my left or to my right, or sometimes I imagine it standing across the field. I see it as a way to examine mother, right? To sort of hold mother up to the light and turn it around. Like, what kind of mother am I? How was I mothered by my own mother, by my grandmother, by America? And then what kind of mother did I become? What kind of woman did I become? And what does it mean to be mother? You know, that last poem that I read, one of the things, and I don't say all of this, but it's there in the poem, is that what happens to us and what happens to Black people, period. But I think Black women in particular, I mean, that's what I know, but I know this from talking to my sisters, is that every time another Black person is killed, it's not just the news for us. We take it so deeply, and we mourn for the person who died. We're angry about what this country continues to do. We're thinking about the actual mother of that person who died. If that person was a parent, we're thinking about it from that way. So it's really to hold mother up and everything that it means. And for me, being a rural person who believes that of nature's capacity to heal, and for Black people, I feel like in some ways the connection to the earth has been taken away from us. Part of that was, you know, of course, through slavery, but so many of us fear, like, you know, do you want to go to the cabin in the woods? No, girl, you know, I'm not going out there. Who knows what could happen? And I think nature's capacity to heal has the concept of mother involved there too. So I am talking about Mother Earth as well.
Yes, thank you so much. And Robin had said, what you stated makes her think of Sweet Honey in the Rocks, The Women Gather.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
So, and Crystal, is there another poem you can share with us?
I'll read another short one.
Okay.
This, you know, my grandparents are all through this, and I just got through talking about Ron being the illustrator. So I'll read Witness, which is on page 70.
Okay.
And there's a beautiful illustration with this one too. I don't know if you all can see it, but it's a woman standing behind a man with her arms around him.
Mm-hmm.
And we often talked about that this should be our wedding invitation. And so he used this one. And so I write a lot about my grandparents, and Ron never had the opportunity to meet them. So this is a poem that I think is a very emotional poem, but it also has a little bit of humor in it, called Witness, for Ron Davis. I'm convinced that if you could have seen my grandmother standing in the doorway waiting for him to come home from the fields, if you'd smelled that spectacular evening thick with sweat and felt the pulsing of the stars, if you'd borne witness to the animals' moans echoing in the holler that night, if you just could have seen the hair rise up on Granddaddy's arm like that, like offerings to God when his elbow touched hers, if you could have seen her longing dissipate just a little as he came through the door smelling like a day's work, you should have seen them, close enough to breathe the same air while not even touching. He smiled at her without smiling. If you could have seen them watching me watch them, then you'd know how much I love you. If you could have heard her say, "You want some supper? We got pie."
Oh, that's a warm one right there. That's definitely a sweetie poem.
It is a sweetie pie love poem.
I felt that, Crystal. You don't have to, send me some of your mojo now. Oh, wow. Well, Crystal, I wanted to ask you thank you so much for sharing your beautiful poems. I know this is an amazing treat for everyone who's watching and listening to you, and it's an amazing treat for me, and I thank you so much for sharing your work and words and some of your time with us. I would like to ask you what's coming up next for you, how we can best support you, whether we are near or far, and where we can pick up Perfect Black, of course.
Okay. Well, I think you should be able to pick up Perfect Black wherever books are sold. If they don't have it on their shelves, ask them for it, and they will be able to order it for you through any of the sort of standard places that bookstores get books from. You can also order it on bookshop.org, which I recommend, which will benefit your local bookstore wherever you live. What I have coming up, one of the themes, even within this book, is about the kitchen ghost. I started doing some research about my ancestry, and particularly my matriarchal ancestry. So I have a book coming out called Praise Song for the Kitchen Ghost, which will be hitting bookstores in late 2023 or early 24. They don't exactly have the pub date yet.
Congratulations, Crystal.
Thank you.
Will be waiting for that. Yes.
I'm excited about that book.
And Crystal, I just want to share a few more comments with you. Elizabeth Burton Writer said that she always enjoys hearing you read. She loves to hear you read. And Spontaneous Overflow, Rashmi says, it's always such a privilege to hear you read, Crystal.
Thank you.
You have such warmth coming from the comments here.
Thank you.
And Crystal, do you also have any virtual events for those upcoming virtual, other than this one, that people can join or check out if they don't live, in Kentucky, near, in your area?
I think in beginning in January, I'll have some other events. I should have been more prepared because I don't have my schedule in front of me. My website is a little bit behind, but crystalewilkinson.net has an events page on there, and I'll get somebody to update that soon. So those events will be on there.
Oh, that's perfect. Well, I'm going to put that in the chat here so that people definitely know to go to that. And then, of course, you're here on Instagram, you're on, the Twitters, and you're also on Facebook, so folk can follow you on the socials. And
yes,
what's coming too.
I'm
right?
everywhere. Don't look at my TikTok yet because I haven't quite got my.
Oh, good. She's on TikTok, y'all. Let's run and follow Crystal Wilkinson on TikTok. So we'll look forward to you there as well.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Crystal Wilkinson. This has been a pleasure and quite an honor to talk with you this evening. I wish you a wonderful holiday season, you and your family and loved ones. Congratulations again on your beautiful works, on being Poet Laureate, as well as your forthcoming books. We'll be looking out for those, and I'll continue to follow you and support what you're doing.
Okay. Thank you so much, sister. And you all make sure you subscribe to Nerdacity
Yes.
podcast too,
Nerdacity
because it's wonderful.
podcast. Yay. Oh, wait, Crystal, and we got merch too. I'm wearing one.
Oh, that's right.
I'm calling this the Purple Rocker Nerdacity t-shirt.
There you go.
In honor of you know who.
Yes.
Okay, well, thanks again, and thanks for joining us, everyone. Please follow Nerdacity Podcast on IG, Twitter, and Facebook. Have a beautiful evening. Take care, Crystal.
Thank you, DuEwa.